The underground lab hummed with a quiet intensity that belied the desperation of its mission. Rows of modified plant specimens grew under artificial light, each one a testament to human ingenuity and Elena Rodriguez's relentless determination. Her fingers traced the genetic sequencer's holographic display, lines of complex DNA structures dancing beneath her touch. Aria, Elena's 8-year-old daughter, sat in the corner of the lab, her small frame connected to a medical monitoring system that tracked the progression of her rare genetic condition. Toxic exposure from the environmental collapse had left her with a unique genetic mutation, one that most scientists had declared a death sentence. But Elena saw something different. Where others saw a genetic defect, she saw potential. "Mommy," Aria called out, her voice soft but curious. "Why do the plants look different today?" Elena smiled, her eyes never leaving the holographic display. "Because these aren't just plants anymore, sweetheart. They're solutions." The lab was a converted subway tunnel beneath what was once Chicago's financial district. After the Great Coastal Collapse of 2089, most of the city had been abandoned, leaving behind a network of underground spaces that became refuges for those unwilling to accept humanity's apparent decline. Elena's team was composed of scientific outcasts, researchers who had been dismissed, discredited, or simply forgotten by mainstream institutions. Dr. Marcus Chen, a former quantum biology researcher who had been ousted from his prestigious university position, worked silently at a nearby workstation. His fingers moved rapidly across holographic interfaces, analyzing cellular response patterns that would have been impossible to detect just a decade earlier. To his left, Dr. Imani Okeke, a genetic engineer who had been blacklisted for her radical research into plant-human cellular communication, was cultivating a particularly promising specimen. "Elena," Marcus called out, his voice tight with excitement. "Look at this cellular response pattern." The plant in question looked unremarkable to the untrained eye, a small green shoot with slightly iridescent leaves that seemed to shimmer slightly under the lab's artificial lighting. But the data streaming across the holographic display told a different story. The plant was demonstrating unprecedented adaptive capabilities, creating molecular structures that defied conventional understanding of botanical biology. Aria watched her mother work, her small hand absently tracing the medical interface attached to her arm. The monitoring system was more than just a health tracker. It was part of Elena's grand experiment. The same genetic mutation that threatened to destroy Aria's health might be the key to unlocking a revolutionary approach to planetary survival. "We're running out of time," Elena muttered, more to herself than to anyone else in the lab. The global environmental collapse had accelerated beyond most predictive models. Toxic zones expanded daily. Habitable regions shrank. Humanity was being squeezed into smaller and smaller pockets of survivability. Dr. Okeke approached with a data tablet, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "The latest satellite readings are not good. The toxic bloom in the Southeast Asian agricultural zones has expanded by another 200 square kilometers. Traditional remediation techniques are failing faster than we can implement them." Elena's jaw clenched. The stakes couldn't be higher. Her research wasn't just about scientific curiosity or academic recognition. It was about survival, not just for her daughter, not just for her team, but for the entire human species. The lab's security system chirped, a subtle warning that external scanning was in progress. Remnants of government monitoring systems still swept through urban zones, looking for unauthorized scientific research. Elena's work existed in a legal gray area that was more black than gray. If discovered, she and her entire team would be shut down immediately. "Mask the emissions," she called out to Marcus, who was already adjusting the lab's shielding systems. The plant specimens would appear as nothing more than standard agricultural research to any external scanning systems. Aria watched her mother with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Are you going to save everyone, Mommy?" Elena paused, looking at her daughter. The medical interface pulsed softly, a constant reminder of the personal motivation behind her work. "I'm going to try, sweetheart. I'm going to try. The plant before them seemed to respond to her words, its leaves subtly shifting, molecular structures realigning in ways that defied current scientific understanding. Something was brewing. A solution that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about survival, adaptation, and the very nature of life itself. The Zortak ship descended like a mountain of obsidian steel, blocking out the sun over what remained of New Chicago's skyline. Its geometric surfaces shifted and realigned, a living testament to technology so advanced it bordered on biological. Ambassador Kriksta, a towering insectoid creature standing nearly 3 meters tall, watched the planet's surface through multifaceted eyes that could perceive spectrums far beyond human capability. Primitive, Kriksta chittered to his second-in-command, Kresik, a younger Zortak scientist whose curiosity had always been considered dangerously unconventional by their species standards. Look at the environmental degradation. Another failed evolutionary experiment. The transmission preparation team worked with military precision. They would broadcast their initial assessment to the entire Galactic Confederation, a public humiliation that would definitively categorize humanity as a species unworthy of serious consideration. Holographic displays flickered with data streams showing Earth's toxic zones, collapsed ecosystems, and struggling urban centers. In the underground lab, Alina and her team watched the incoming transmission with a mixture of dread and defiance. The massive Zortak ship's scanning beams cut through the city like surgical instruments, probing, analyzing, judging. They're mapping everything, Dr. Chen muttered, his fingers dancing across a series of defensive interface screens. Detailed molecular-level scans. If they detect our research. They won't, Alina interrupted, her voice calm but steel-edged. Arya sat nearby, her medical interface pulsing softly, the young girl's eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The global broadcast began. Kriksta's translated voice boomed through every remaining communication network, a calculated message of scientific and cultural superiority. Attention, Earth civilization. The Galactic Confederation has completed its preliminary assessment of your planetary system. Your environmental collapse represents a terminal stage of evolutionary failure. Your agricultural zones are non-functional. Your urban centers are toxic wastelands. Your species demonstrates no capacity for meaningful interstellar adaptation. Each word was accompanied by visual evidence, satellite imagery showing dying forests, contaminated water systems, abandoned cities slowly being reclaimed by toxic vegetation. It was a clinical dissection of humanity's apparent environmental suicide. Kresik, standing beside Kriksta, felt something unexpected. A twinge of something. Not quite sympathy, something more analytical. The scanning data showed anomalies that didn't align with the standard planetary collapse models. Ambassador, Kresik ventured, his translator rendering his complex chittering into precise human language. The agricultural scan is showing unexpected molecular variations in certain zones. Kriksta's attention shifted, mandibles clicking with dismissive irritation. Irrelevant biological mutations. Typical last gasp attempts at survival. Nothing more. But Kresik was not so easily deterred. His scientific training ran counter to the Zortak's typical approach of immediate categorical dismissal. Where others sought a dead planet, he saw a complex system with potential for surprising adaptations. In the underground lab, Alina watched the transmission with a slight smile that made Marcus Chen nervous. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "They're looking," Alina responded, her eyes never leaving the holographic display. "But they're not seeing." The Zortak transmission continued, a clinical autopsy of human potential. Images of toxic landscapes, failing infrastructure, collapsing ecosystems, each frame designed to demonstrate humanity's fundamental inadequacy. Arya tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, are they going to hurt us?" Alina's hand found her daughter's, squeezing gently. "No, sweetheart. They're going to underestimate us. And that's going to be their biggest mistake." Kresik continued to analyze the scanning data. Something in the agricultural zones was different. Molecular structures that shifted in ways that defied standard biological models. Adaptive patterns that suggested something more than simple survival mechanisms. Ambassador. He tried again. These readings. Enough. Crixta interrupted. Prepare the final summary transmission. We will categorize this planet as a Class F ecological failure. Minimal research value. Recommended for long-term observation, but no direct intervention required. The final broadcast would seal humanity's fate in the galactic records. A species deemed too weak, too damaged to be of any consequential interest. What the Zortak didn't know was that every scan, every probing transmission was being absorbed, analyzed, understood. In laboratories like Alina's, in hidden research stations around the planet, humanity was watching, learning, preparing. The plants in Alina's lab seemed to shimmer slightly, as if responding to the massive scanning energies washing over the city. Molecular structures realigning, adaptive systems engaging. Something was brewing, and the Zortak had no idea. The breakthrough came at 3:47 Eastern Standard Time, when most of the world was silent and the underground lab hummed with the quiet intensity of scientific obsession. Dr. Imani Okik had been running continuous genetic sequencing trials, her dark eyes fixed on a holographic display that looked more like an abstract painting than scientific data. "Alina," she called out, her voice a mix of excitement and disbelief. "You need to see this." Alina Rodriguez moved quickly, Aria sleeping nearby on a makeshift cot surrounded by medical monitoring equipment. The soft pulse of her daughter's health interface created a rhythmic backdrop to the lab's electronic symphony. The holographic display showed something impossible. The plant specimen, a genetically modified variant of a common kudzu vine, was demonstrating molecular transformations that defied every known principle of botanical science. Its cellular structure was actively redesigning itself, creating complex molecular chains that seemed to respond to environmental stimuli in real time. "It's not just adapting," Imani whispered. "It's thinking." Dr. Marcus Chen joined them, his quantum biology background providing a unique perspective. His fingers traced the holographic data, picking apart the molecular sequences. "The genetic communication network is unlike anything I've ever seen. Look here." He pointed to a series of molecular interactions that seemed to communicate across cellular boundaries in patterns that resembled neural networks more than plant biology. The specimen in question looked unremarkable. A simple green vine in a sealed growth chamber, its leaves slightly iridescent under the lab's specialized lighting. But the data told a different story. The plant was creating molecular structures that mimicked, and then dramatically improved upon, synthetic materials. "Adaptive metamaterials," Alina muttered, more to herself than to her colleagues. "We're not just modifying plants. We're creating living technology." Gresk, the junior Zortak xenobiologist, had no idea he was about to become the first witness to humanity's most profound scientific breakthrough. His routine scan of Earth's agricultural zones had flagged an anomaly, a molecular pattern so unusual that it triggered a secondary analysis protocol. In the Zortak observation ship, deep scan algorithms began to process the data. Most scanning systems would have dismissed the readings as environmental noise. But Kresik was different. Where other Zortak scientists saw only failure, he saw potential. "Computer," he called out in the complex chittering language of his species, "isolate and expand molecular sequence Delta 79. The holographic display shifted, expanding the molecular structure that had caught his attention. What looked like a simple plant cellular structure began to reveal layers of complexity that shouldn't be possible. Back in the underground lab, Alina understood the true significance of their discovery. The genetic modification wasn't just about creating a plant that could survive in toxic environments. It was about creating a living system that could actively respond to, analyze, and transform environmental challenges. Aria stirred in her sleep, her medical interface momentarily pulsing with a unique frequency that seemed to resonate with the plant specimen. Alina watched, a chill running down her spine. Her daughter's genetic mutation, once seen as a fatal flaw, was becoming the key to something extraordinary. The neural interface, Marcus said softly, watching the data stream. It's not just mimicking a communication network, it's creating one. Imani's fingers flew across another interface, running comparative analyses. These molecular structures, they're not just adaptive. They're generative. The plant is literally creating new molecular configurations in response to environmental stress. The implications were staggering. A plant that could create military-grade materials, a living system that could analyze, adapt, and generate solutions faster than any computer. A biological technology that blurred the line between organic life and engineered system. In the Zortak observation ship, Kresic felt something dangerous. Excitement, a scientific curiosity that ran counter to his species' typical approach of immediate categorization and dismissal. "This is impossible," he muttered, knowing full well that in science, impossible was just another challenge waiting to be solved. Elena Rodriguez looked at the plant specimen, then at her sleeping daughter. The medical interface pulsed. The plant's molecular structure shifted. Something was emerging. A solution that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about survival, adaptation, and the very nature of life itself. The first true hybrid of biology and technology was being born. And nobody, not the Zortak, not the failing human governments, not the dying planet itself, had any idea what was coming. The first true test came without warning. New Hope Colony, a struggling agricultural settlement on the outskirts of what was once the California Central Valley, had become humanity's last significant attempt at large-scale food production. Surrounded by toxic wastelands and protected by rapidly deteriorating environmental shields, it was a final testament to human resilience. Elena had secretly deployed her most advanced plant networks across the colony's agricultural zones. What looked like ordinary crops to satellite scans were actually living, adaptive defense systems waiting to be activated. The Zortak attack began at 600 hours, local time. Massive dropships pierced the atmospheric shields, their weapon systems unlike anything humanity had encountered. Plasma-based munitions that could liquefy solid matter. Quantum disruption fields that could instantaneously neutralize electronic systems. Weapons designed to render a planet's infrastructure completely inoperable in minutes. Commander Rachel Torres, the colony's military director, watched in horror as the first wave of attacks began. Her defensive systems were lighting up with impossible threat signatures. Standard military protocols suggested immediate evacuation. But something else was happening. The wheat fields shifted first. What had appeared to be golden crops suddenly rippled with an impossible iridescence. Molecular structures realigned, transforming ordinary plant matter into something entirely new. Wheat stalks became flexible ceramic armor plates. Root systems extended, creating underground communication networks that mapped and anticipated the incoming attack vectors. "What the hell?" Torres muttered into her communication link. Kresic, who had been monitoring the attack from the Zortak command ship, leaned forward in disbelief. The planetary scan was showing something completely unprecedented. The agricultural zone was responding, not just defending. Responding. The Zortak assault shuttle approached its primary target, a central power generation facility. Its quantum disruption cannons powered up, preparing to reduce the entire complex to molecular dust. Standard planetary defenses would have been helpless. The surrounding crops had other plans. Fruit trees near the facility began to secrete a crystalline substance that absorbed and redirected energy. Grass transformed into flexible sensor networks that tracked and predicted weapon trajectories. The very ground seemed to be reconfiguring itself, creating adaptive defensive structures faster than the Zortak weapons could adapt. "Impossible," Kriksta growled, mandibles clicking with frustration. "No biological system can respond this quickly." But Kresic was transfixed. The data streaming across his analysis interface told a different story. This wasn't just defense. This was a living, thinking system that was actively learning and adapting in real time. Back in the underground lab, Alina watched the live feed with a mixture of hope and terror. Aria sat beside her, the young girl's medical interface pulsing in a rhythm that seemed to match the defensive molecular transformations happening hundreds of miles away. "Mommy," Aria said softly, "the garden is fighting back." The first Zortak assault shuttle crashed spectacularly, not shot down by traditional weapons, but literally absorbed by the surrounding landscape. Molecular structures from nearby plants had reconfigured themselves, creating a complex energy absorption matrix that neutralized the ship's systems. Commander Torres's communication systems lit up with impossible readings. Her defense monitoring software couldn't comprehend what was happening. The agricultural zone wasn't just defending itself, it was actively counterattacking. Root systems emerged from the ground, creating complex molecular barriers that could redirect energy weapons. Crop plants generated electromagnetic disruption fields that interfered with Zortak targeting systems. What had looked like a simple farming settlement was revealing itself as a living, thinking defensive network. Kressik's hands moved rapidly across his analysis interface. He was no longer just observing. He was documenting something that would challenge everything his species understood about biological systems. "This is not random," he muttered. "This is deliberate. This is intelligent." 3 more Zortak assault shuttles attempted to breach the colony's perimeter. Each one was neutralized in a different way. One was absorbed by rapidly growing crystalline structures. Another was redirected by complex electromagnetic fields generated by what appeared to be ordinary grass. The third simply ceased to function, its systems completely disrupted by molecular transformations happening at a cellular level. Krixta's massive form trembled with barely contained rage. "Prepare full-scale assault protocols," he commanded. But something fundamental had changed. Humanity had just demonstrated a capability that went far beyond simple planetary defense. They had shown the ability to turn an entire ecosystem into a living, thinking weapon system. And this was just the beginning. The Zortak response was swift and overwhelming. What had been a preliminary assault transformed into a full-scale planetary invasion. Massive battleships descended, their weapons capable of sterilizing entire continents. Krixta was determined to crush what he perceived as a momentary aberration, a lucky defensive maneuver that would soon be thoroughly eliminated. In the underground lab, Alina Rodriguez worked with a feverish intensity that bordered on madness. The New Hope colony's defense had been more successful than even she had anticipated. Her daughter Aria watched, her small hands tracing holographic displays that seemed to pulse in resonance with the plant network spreading across the planet. "We need to go global," Dr. Marcus Chen muttered, analyzing incoming data streams. "The Zortak won't make the same mistake twice. They'll be targeting every agricultural zone with full-spectrum elimination protocols." Resik, now effectively a defector from the Zortak invasion force, had become a crucial ally. His xenobiological expertise provided insights that were transforming Alina's research from a desperate experiment to a planetary defense strategy. Their invasion protocol is structured around total electromagnetic and molecular disruption, Kresk explained, his complex biological translator rendering his thoughts in precise human language. They intend to create zones of absolute sterility. No biological system can survive their next wave of attacks. The Zortak's second assault was nothing like the first. Quantum disruption fields spread across entire regions, designed to break down molecular bonds at a fundamental level. Entire ecosystems should have been reduced to atomic dust. Should have been. The plant networks that Alina had been developing revealed their true potential. Where traditional biological systems would have collapsed, these living networks adapted. Molecular structures shifted, creating defensive matrices that absorbed and redirected the Zortak's most advanced weaponry. Forests transformed. Grass became sensor networks. Crop fields generated complex energy absorption systems. What had once been simple agricultural zones were now living, thinking defensive networks that could predict, absorb, and counter the Zortak's most advanced weapons. Commander Rachel Torres, leading the human resistance from a hidden command center, watched in awe as entire regions transformed. A Zortak quantum disruption field would sweep across a landscape, only to find that the landscape itself was actively resisting, adapting, fighting back. It's like the entire planet is becoming a single living organism, Torres muttered into her communication system. Aria Rodriguez approached one of the lab's plant specimens, her small hand hovering near its leaves. The plant seemed to respond, its molecular structure shifting subtly in response to her proximity. Elena watched, a chill running down her spine. Her daughter's unique genetic condition was becoming more than just a medical anomaly. It was the key to something far more profound. Resik's analysis revealed the true nature of the transformation. The plant networks weren't just defending. They were learning. Each Zortak attack provided more data, more understanding. The defensive systems were evolving faster than any computer could process. They're creating a distributed intelligence network, Kresk explained to Elena. Not just a defensive system, a living, thinking planetary defense mechanism. Krix's frustration reached a boiling point. 3 major assault waves had been completely neutralized. Entire Zortak battle groups had been absorbed, redirected, or simply ceased to function when they entered certain planetary zones. "This is impossible," he raged to his command staff. "No biological system can adapt this quickly. No planetary defense can be this sophisticated." But it was happening. Humanity's most desperate scientific experiment was revealing itself to be something far more significant. A new form of planetary intelligence was emerging, one that blurred the lines between biology, technology, and consciousness. The Zortak had come expecting to find a dying planet. Instead, they discovered a living weapon that was learning, adapting, and preparing to fight back in ways they could never have anticipated. In the underground lab, Elena Rodriguez looked at her daughter. Aria's medical interface pulsed in perfect synchronization, with the plant networks spreading across the planet. Something extraordinary was emerging, a new form of life that combined human potential with botanical adaptation. The ecological warfare had only just begun, and humanity was no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to transform. The true nature of the living network revealed itself in ways no one could have predicted. Aria Rodriguez stood at the center of the underground lab, her small body now connected to a complex array of biological interfaces, where most would see a medical monitoring system. Elena and her team recognized something far more extraordinary. Aria wasn't just connected to the network. She was becoming a conduit for its consciousness. The neural interface is two-way, Dr. Imani O'Keefe whispered, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of scientific excitement and existential terror. She's not just receiving information, she's transmitting, generating. Kresk studied the holographic displays, his alien physiology allowing him to perceive molecular interactions invisible to human scientists. The plant network was no longer just a defensive system. It was becoming something else entirely, a distributed intelligence that used biological systems as its neural pathways. Global communication networks began to show impossible patterns. Satellite imagery revealed landscapes that seemed to breathe, shift, and respond to threats before they materialized. Forests in South America communicated with grasslands in Africa. Coastal vegetation synchronized with mountain ecosystems in ways that defied traditional ecological understanding. The Zortak command ship detected these anomalies first. Massive data streams showed planetary systems communicating faster than light, using molecular communication methods that shouldn't be possible. "This is not defense," Krix's translator rendered his complex chittering into human language. "This is a living organism preparing to fight back." In the underground lab, Elena watched her daughter with a mixture of maternal love and scientific fascination. Aria's medical interface pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match global ecological patterns. Her genetic mutation, once seen as a fatal flaw, was now the bridge between human consciousness and a planetary intelligence. "The network is learning," Kresk explained, his alien perspective providing unique insights. "Each Zortak attack provides more data, more understanding. The biological systems are creating a distributed intelligence that can predict, adapt, and counter threats at a molecular level. Entire ecosystems began to demonstrate capabilities that bordered on the impossible. A Zortak reconnaissance drone entering the Amazon rainforest would find itself slowly absorbed, its molecular structure systematically broken down and repurposed. Grasslands in the African savanna could generate complex electromagnetic fields that disrupted advanced technological systems. Commander Rachel Torres received reports that defied conventional military understanding. Entire defensive zones were now self-organizing, creating complex molecular barriers that could redirect energy weapons, absorb radiation, and neutralize advanced technological threats. It's like the planet is becoming a single living organism, Torres muttered to her command team. And we're just beginning to understand what that means. Aria's connection to the network deepened. Her medical interface began to show extraordinary readings. Genetic structures that had once been seen as a fatal mutation were now revealing themselves as a bridge between human consciousness and a new form of planetary intelligence. "Mommy," she said softly, her eyes focusing on something beyond the physical laboratory. "They're talking to me." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The they wasn't a metaphor. The plant networks, the global ecological systems, were communicating through her daughter as a living conduit. Resic's analysis revealed the true depth of the transformation. The network wasn't just defending. It was evolving, learning, creating new methods of communication and defense that went beyond traditional biological or technological understanding. The Zortak command ship detected something unprecedented. Planetary systems were now communicating faster than light, using molecular communication methods that should have been impossible. Entire ecosystems were synchronizing, creating a distributed intelligence that could predict and counter threats before they even materialized. "This is not a planetary defense system," Resic explained to Elena. "This is a new form of life, a planetary consciousness that can think, adapt, and fight back." Aria's connection to the network continued to deepen. Her medical interface pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match global ecological patterns. The genetic mutation that had once threatened her life was now the bridge between human consciousness and a planetary intelligence. In that moment, humanity's most desperate scientific experiment revealed itself to be something far more significant. A new form of planetary intelligence was emerging, one that blurred the lines between biology, technology, and consciousness. The living network was no longer just preparing to fight. It was preparing to transform everything. The final confrontation began not with a weapon, but with a communication. Crixta's massive form trembled with barely contained rage as the Zortak flagship prepared its ultimate weapon, a molecular disassembler capable of reducing entire planetary systems to atomic dust. Standard protocols demanded total annihilation. This human planet had become an unprecedented threat to the Galactic Confederation's established order. Aria Rodriguez stood at the center of the underground lab, her small body now a living conduit for a planetary intelligence that defied every known scientific principle. The plant networks that had begun as Elena's desperate experiment had transformed into something far more profound. A living, thinking system that could communicate, adapt, and fight back. "They're coming," Aria said softly, her eyes focused on something beyond the physical laboratory. "All of them." Elena gripped her daughter's hand, watching as holographic displays showed a global response unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. Forests, grasslands, agricultural zones, entire ecosystems were synchronizing, not just defending, communicating. Resic, the Zortak xenobiologist who had defected, watched in scientific rapture. "It's a complete systemic response," he explained to Commander Rachel Torres. "The planet itself is preparing to fight back." The Zortak's ultimate weapon charge, quantum disruption fields, began to form around the planetary perimeter. Molecular bonds should have been torn apart. Entire ecosystems should have been reduced to their base atomic components. Should have been. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The planet began to communicate, not through traditional communication systems, not through radio waves or electromagnetic signals, but through a complex molecular language that spread faster than light, more intricate than any computer network. Crix's first indication that something was wrong came when the ship's primary systems began to respond to something other than their own commands. Molecular structures within the ship's hull began to shift. Adaptive systems designed to withstand the most extreme environments suddenly became unpredictable, impossible. Crix chittered, mandibles clicking with increasing panic. But it was happening. The living network that had begun in Elena Rodriguez's underground lab was now a planetary defense system that went far beyond traditional understanding. Entire ecosystems were communicating, adapting, fighting back in ways that defied every known principle of biological or technological warfare. Aria's connection to the network deepened. Her medical interface pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match global ecological patterns. The genetic mutation that had once threatened her life was now the bridge between human consciousness and a planetary intelligence. "We're not fighting," Aria said softly. "We're communicating." Gressik's analysis showed the true nature of the confrontation. The Zortak's quantum weapon was being systematically absorbed, redirected, transformed. Molecular structures within the weapon itself were being rewritten, repurposed. The Zortak flagship began to change, not destroyed, not defeated, but transformed. Metallic hull sections began to show organic patterns. Advanced technological systems merged with biological adaptive networks. The ship itself was becoming something neither human nor Zortak could fully comprehend. Commander Torres watched in awe as global defensive systems revealed their true potential. Entire ecosystems were now a single, living, thinking defense network. Forests generated complex energy barriers. Grasslands created molecular communication networks. Agricultural zones became adaptive shield generators. "This is not a weapon," Kresk explained. "This is a conversation." Crix's rage transformed into something else. Fear. Understanding. The Zortak had come expecting to find a dying planet. Instead, they discovered a living intelligence that could adapt, communicate, and transform at a molecular level. The planetary defense was no longer just defending. It was communicating, showing, demonstrating a form of intelligence that went beyond any known technological or biological system. Aria Rodriguez stood at the center of it all. Her small hand still held by her mother, she watched as the living network demonstrated its true potential. Not destruction, not conquest. Communication. The Zortak flagship hung in orbit, its systems fundamentally altered. No longer a weapon of invasion. Something else entirely. A bridge. "We're not alone," Aria whispered. And for the first time, humanity truly understood what that meant. In the weeks following the extraordinary confrontation, humanity found itself transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The underground lab that had been Elena Rodriguez's secret sanctuary became the epicenter of a new understanding. Diplomatic envoys from the Zortak Confederation arrived not as conquerors, but as students. Kresk stood as a bridge between two civilizations, explaining a breakthrough that defied every previous concept of intelligence, communication, and survival. Aria Rodriguez had become something more than a child. Her unique genetic condition, once seen as a fatal mutation, was now understood as the first manifestation of a new form of planetary consciousness. Medical researchers, xenobiologists, and quantum physicists from both human and Zortak teams studied her with a mixture of scientific fascination and profound respect. "It's not about defense," Kresk explained during a global conference that brought together the most brilliant minds from multiple species. "It's about communication. The living network your daughter helped create is a form of intelligence that doesn't distinguish between biological and technological systems." The transformed Zortak flagship remained in Earth's orbit, no longer a weapon of invasion, but a living testament to the potential of adaptive intelligence. Its molecular structure had become a hybrid of technological and biological systems, continuously evolving, continuously communicating. Commander Rachel Torres, who had once prepared for total planetary defense, now led a new kind of diplomatic course. The military infrastructure that had been prepared for total war was being repurposed into a global communication and ecological restoration network. Elena Rodriguez watched all of this with a mixture of wonder and maternal pride. The desperate experiment that had begun in a hidden underground lab had fundamentally altered humanity's understanding of intelligence, survival, and connection. "We were never just fighting to survive," she told a group of young researchers. "We were fighting to understand." The global ecological networks that had emerged during the conflict began to reveal their true potential. Entire planetary systems that had been considered toxic or uninhabitable were now being transformed. The living network could communicate, adapt, and restore at a molecular level. Resic's scientific team discovered that the communication network went far beyond Earth. Molecular communication patterns suggested connections with other planetary systems, hinting at a universe far more interconnected than anyone had previously imagined. "Your daughter has become a bridge," he told Elena, "not just between humans and Zortak, between different forms of intelligence." Aria herself remained largely mysterious. Her medical interfaces showed capabilities that defied traditional understanding. She could communicate with the global ecological network in ways that no scientific instrument could fully comprehend. Sometimes she would speak of conversations happening at molecular levels, of communication occurring faster than light, of connections that existed beyond human perception. The Zortak Confederation underwent its own transformation. The rigid hierarchical structure that had defined their civilization began to break down. Their most advanced technological systems were being reimagined, inspired by the adaptive intelligence they had witnessed on Earth. Global restoration projects began in earnest. The toxic zones that had once threatened human survival were now sites of extraordinary ecological renewal. Plants developed by Elena's team could clean environments, generate resources, and create adaptive infrastructure at a molecular level. "We're not rebuilding," Elena would explain to visitors. "We're evolving." The underground lab became a global research center, with scientists from multiple species working together to understand the living network. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save a dying planet had become a blueprint for a new understanding of intelligence, survival, and connection. Aria would sometimes sit in the center of the lab, her small hand touching plant specimens that would respond in complex molecular patterns. To her, there was no distinction between communication, defense, and existence. Everything was connected. Everything was alive. As the first anniversary of the extraordinary confrontation approached, humanity looked to the future with a sense of wonder that replaced the previous fear. The living network had shown them something profound. That survival was not about conquest, but about communication. Not about individual preservation, but about collective transformation. In the underground lab, surrounded by the living network that had saved humanity, Elena Rodriguez looked at her daughter. Aria smiled, a smile that seemed to contain entire universes of understanding. They had not just survived, they had evolved.